What's up, guys? Here I am, more jacked and more bendy than ever before. So, like all my training, I kind of assess it over time and find out what works, what I can do differently. So, it's been about a month, and I've made some changes to my flexibility routine, and so I want to show you again what I'm doing now. I guess the biggest changes I've made are going to be one, I've started kind of alternating stretching anterior muscles and posterior muscles, and two, some of my stretches I've modified so that there's no weight bearing in the muscle being stretched. For example, like a forward bend for the hamstrings. Your hamstrings are also supporting the weight of your body, so I've replaced that with a sitting one. But there's a couple changes like that. But anyway, let's jump into it. I always start with this just against the wall, and I don't want to have to get up on the wall again. But this one you can only stretch so far, but I do feel it helps me get into the deeper hip stretches for splits and stuff like that later. So I've always included it. First, you want to make sure your knee is bent as far as you can, but after that, you want to be trying to kind of push your hip forward to get into hip extension. And of course, like I said in my last session, your flexibility, I think it's a skill, just like a lot of other athletic movements. You have to learn to relax a muscle. That takes time and experience. So anyway, after I hit that with the hips real quick, I'm actually just going to roll out my back really fast, because when I do some forward bends, you're stretching your back too. So I just like to move around a little bit, loosen that up, and then I'm going to go straight into a hamstring stretch from here. So I really like doing it here because you can adjust your hip position. Ideally, to compress as much as possible, you want your hips on the ground with your legs as straight, as parallel to the ground as you can. But you can kind of find that balance, move around, stretch your back and your hamstrings. At the same time, I'm focusing more on the hamstrings because those are probably my limiting factor in the stretch or in the splits right now. After that, that's an example of a non-weight bearing posterior musculature stretch. Move into the hips. And I've started doing this a little differently as well. I start off turning away from my front leg, and after it loosens up a little bit, I'm going to shift all the weight onto my front leg. I'm going to swap over, put my hand behind me, and I'm going to reach back to stretch out my abs as well. So I'm getting that whole front chain right here. Deep breaths, relax. Like before, I'd probably spend, about 20 seconds on each stretch. Repeat that on the other side. I've actually condensed this routine quite a bit. Just focusing on what I feel is most important. Loosen up in there. Weight onto the front leg. And switch back. Stretch out those abs. More than the abs, I want to stretch the hips, but so that's where the focus is, but we can get both at the same time. Go. As long as one is not detracting the other. There we go. So that's a front stretch. Go into the back stretch from there. Another thing I've changed in my routine is I've emphasized this straddle a little more. It's definitely a weak spot for me. It's never felt good. So I don't really push it too hard. And then I'm just kind of rocking my hips around, just finding that space. I think this one's hard for me because of this frontal movement, opening the hips out to the side. It's a movement that I never really perform in regular life. So every time I hit it, it's like, wow, you haven't done anything even remotely close to this since the last time you stretched. But after I work into that a little bit, I'm going to put one elbow right in my crotch, bend over. I like to try to, it takes a little umph, but I like to grab my toes. And I can pull and relax into it a little more. This kind of gets that those frontal plane muscles, the adductors, as well as the hamstrings at the same time. Not to mention your obliques and your lats. So this is a kind of a killer stretch right here. And I've always had a problem with my right hip, so going to the right here is a little harder for me. But I'm going for the same thing. A little umph to grab the toes. Maybe you can see that if this is a little tighter, then I'm going to twist into it, just as much as uncomfortable. Like always, breathe, relax. Should feel good. It shouldn't hurt. After I do that, I am going to push a little farther into the straddle and come forward just a little bit. Yeah, there's a difference between bending your spine forward and actually rocking the hips forward. And what I want is the hips to move forward. I'm not really trying to stretch my back right now. So if I wanted to stretch the back as well and flatten out a little more, not much. But anyway, it's all about the hips here. That's nice. All right. And then I've been really hammering this one. So I'm actually going to come back into this front hip stretch. Same thing I did before. Should be a little looser. Should get a little more movement this time. Don't be afraid to move around a little bit. Find that sweet spot before you completely relax and hold it for a second. Just getting practice moving around and feeling those positions is something that's going to contribute long term to your ability to get into deeper stretches. Rocking it out, shifting the weight onto the front leg, flipping over. There we go. I'm going to go into just super simple. So I don't do this standing anymore at all. We're just doing a forward bend hamstring stretch. But what I found I like to do is actually keep my legs bent a little bit and then push my rib cage as far forward onto my thighs as I can. Pull myself into it. And once I kind of have that hip compression, then I'll straighten out my legs. These are such big muscles here, and you have to, they're so strong. You have to use your lats to pull into it. So I find this one's a little harder to relax into, but it can be done. It must be done. All right, that's good. Now I'm gonna do my just my basic seal. keeping my legs, my knees, I guess, about shoulder width apart. Bringing my hands down, nice and low. If I don't bring them low enough, I can't push myself high enough. So this is nice because I've already stretched out my front hips a lot. So I can really focus on the spine and the abs stretching here. Kind of ease into it, gradually increase the contraction in the glutes and the low back. Keep my legs straight and my hips on the ground. Deep breaths really help me find a stretch here. Not just trying to mash my spine backwards, trying to elongate abdominals. There we go. That's most of my basic kind of front and back stretching. I'm going to hit the straddle one more time, and then I'm going to move into some bridge work. Actually, lately, going into the bridge and pushing into it, I think because I've been strengthening my glutes and my low back in the really contracted state, that's what's been the best way to stretch my abs lately. I can really push into it. All right. Same thing as before, not pushing too hard. Just kind of finding that spot that's gentle stretch, rolling around. Hopefully this is easier this time. A bit, maybe. I'm going to try to breathe into it and push my rib cage into my thigh. Just like with the forward bend, you want your rib cage to be as far down your thigh as possible. Really get that compression. That's pretty good. The bad side. Ooh, it feels like it needs to pop. I can actually pop my right hip really well. It's pretty gnarly. Save that for later. Then I can feel, right there I can feel my right hamstring that I injured a couple years ago, which always gives me trouble. All right, nice. And I'm actually going to do one more thing before I move into the bridge. This is what I've started doing, kind of instead of actually trying the front splits. I've been bringing both legs up. Grab one foot, keep that leg straight, and then I'm just going to kind of let this other leg drop. And the idea is to get your hips back on the ground, your straight leg on the ground, and then still be holding this elevated foot as high as possible. I really like this actually because you can relax both legs while training the splits. And another example of, if you just try to push into the front splits as far as you can, those muscles are bearing the weight of your body. But this way, they're not. So I think it's a little easier to relax, stretch it out. But you still get to practice using the opposite muscles to open the hips. So for my low leg, my glute is contracting to kind of pull it down. And for my high leg, my hip flexor and abs are contracting to get that compression here while I try to open up the hips. And then the hamstring is where I mostly feel the stretch here. But however far you can go doing this, you should be able to go substantially farther when you actually try the splits. But it's still a great way to prepare for them. All right, it's bridge time. I'm just going to push into it. I've been kind of careful with my weight bearing on my wrists lately because I'm actually about 20 pounds heavier than the last time I was made a flexibility video, but I just did some back bends or fallbacks, whatever you call it, earlier. But I'm just going to push into it this time to be a little more gentle. Find that spot. Try to relax my arms, walk my feet in, squeeze the glutes, low back, push it up, let those abs stretch. And as always, breathe. Comfortable. Squeeze in just a little bit more. Walk around a little bit here. Straighten things up just a little bit. That's probably good for now. And after this, depending on how I feel, is when I'll do my tumbling practice. I might practice a couple of variations of high kicks from a forward bend or a back bend position, things like that, rolls, handsprings, etc. But that's the primary. That's why I'm always going to start with the primary flexibility movements. Do those every day after my workout. It's working really well. It's never as fast as you'd like. I'm actually going to hit the forward bend one more time. But as long as I'm making progress, because I'm flexible enough that it's already going to impress a lot of people. Not that impressing them is the goal. Being able to move is the goal, but I'm well ahead of the curve. But I'm definitely at a point where any progress is admirable. So, focusing on consistency and hopefully one day have my front splits. All that good stuff. Now, with this, what you do with your head and neck, it's not your hamstrings. Hamstrings is really what I'm focusing on here, but if I want, I can tuck my head all the way in there. And of course, the closer my head is to my toes is really the goal. I want that compression right here between my thighs and rib cage. Okay, that's it for today. But anyway, that's what it's looked like lately. It's working. Probably in another month or so, it'll look a little different, and I'll be a little more jacked and a little more bendy. But I have no idea how the lighting is right here. Anyway, good luck. Peace out.